There's not many like you and I, born with magic in our blood, the burden of destiny placed upon us. But that is who we are, bound to the raw magics of the multiverse. And with such power, the only thing left up to us is how will we wield it. This is what gives a sorcerer, a sorceress, their true power. How will you wield yours?
Hello and welcome to the Sorcerer Characters Creation Guide for Baldur's Gate 3. I'm Zik, and in this video we will cover everything you need to know to start playing a Sorcerer in the world of Dungeons & Dragons. If you know me from playing a Sorcerer in Diablo 4, don't worry, I'll still be doing a ton of that with my new Power Meteor build guide releasing with the next update. Sometimes though, we must expand our magical horizons to gain a better understanding of the multiverse, and what better way to do that than to wield our magic in the beautiful city of Baldur's Gate. This video will cover the fundamentals of character creation and sorcerer mechanics to get you started playing your perfect version of Sorcerer, with future videos covering more advanced gameplay mechanics and builds. Alright, let's get started. So when you start a new game, you will soon hit the legendary character creation screen, which looks like this. Now the first thing you're going to see is this origin choice, and this basically determines if you want to roll a custom character with custom appearance, background, and choices, or if you want to play a pre-made character. And of these pre-made characters, they're all pretty cool. You can play these little introductions to see what they're all about. This wizard seems pretty rad. Honestly, they all seem pretty rad, but if you're wanting to play a sorcerer, the only one you're really going to have access to is the Dark Urge. And you can see this is the only one that is actually going to let you change your appearance and class to be fully customized with the origin story. And this basically seems like it's going to be if you were wanting to do an evil playthrough on Sorcerer, or if you were wanting to have some sort of evil origin that you were battling against for the sake of good, it seems like this choice would sort of meld those things into your story. And so we're just going to do a custom, fully custom choice, and I think that's going to be the obvious choice for a lot of people. But this Dark Urge one could be pretty cool if you're looking for something a bit different and darker. Obviously, one of the first things you're going to want to do is go to class and change your class to Sorcerer. And this is going to give you access to cantrips, 2 level 1 spells, and your class features, which is basically level 1 spells unlocked right now, which you'll have 2 casts of before a long rest. Then you'll want to decide on a race. There's really a lot of cool options here, and this is going to basically depend on how you want to play Sorcerer. And there's sort of 2 ways you can kind of think about making decisions when creating a character in Dungeons & Dragons. It's from a roleplay perspective or from a mechanics perspective. And so, do you want your race to affect how you look and where your character comes from and how they think and their worldview? Or do you want your race to be chosen based on the features you're going to gain to enhance your ability in combat? And so if you make a role-playing decision based on, you know, I want to be an elf from this place and think this certain way, then you will basically be playing the game and you'll be playing around the features you already have as an elf. Whereas if you're choosing from a mechanics perspective, you're really going to want to take a close look at these class features as well as the subrace features and figure out exactly which ones are going to synergize best with your subclass and the other choices you're making, your cantrips, your spells, etc. Both are very valid ways to play. It really just depends on if you want more of that fantasy immersion and that's what drives you in these games, or if you're looking for more of sort of the mechanics mastery and dominating combat. And so either one is a good choice. Just go with your heart. So let's take a quick look at each race specifically for Sorcerer and see what these race features offer us in terms of advantage. And so you can see most races have a move speed of 9 meters per turn. The shorter races, so halfling, half-elf, or sorry, just halfling and gnome, are going to have 1.5 meters less movement speed. Unfortunately, just because they're small. Dwarf as well, right? And so those 3 are going to have 7.5. Every other one is going to have 9. And then if you are picking a class like an elf, all these have subrace. Not all of them. Some of the races have subrace choices. And so we can see if we play a wood elf, one of the special features of a wood elf is they get an extra 1.5 meters of movement speed, right? So that means every turn, instead of being able to move 9 meters, I can now move 10.5 meters. And so let's take a look first at the elf race and what these features offer. So we have the move speed, and then we have elven weapon training, and this is going to give us proficiency with the longbow, short sword, short bow, and longbow. And what this means is we're going to get to add our proficiency bonus, which starts at a +2 to these rolls. So if we come over here and look at our weapons under proficiencies, you can see that long swords, short swords, longbows, and short bows were added to this proficiency list. And that means when you make an attack roll, when you roll the dice with any of these 4 weapons, you will be able to add that +2 proficiency bonus to your roll. If you don't have these proficiency bonuses, if you are wielding a longbow, you wouldn't get to add that +2 to your roll. You can see just by default, without any additional features, Sorcerer's base weapon proficiencies are daggers, quarterstaffs, and light crossbows. So if you're looking to wield other weapons or focus on more of a weapon style type of combat, you may want to consider weapon proficiencies granted by your race. So for an elf, this is basically swords and bows. Their next feature is they have dark vision, so a lot of different races have this access to dark vision, which basically lets them see up to 12 meters in the dark. And then finally, Fey Ancestry, which gives you advantage on saving throws against being charmed, and magic can't put you to sleep. So on any of these tooltips, if you hit T, you can actually inspect the tooltip, and if you mouse over these highlighted terms, they'll tell you exactly what they do. So advantage in Dungeons and Dragons means you get to roll 2 dice and take the higher value. Saving throws are basically what determines whether a target resists a spell or condition. And so you can use those to sort of navigate these tooltips better. So now let's take a look at the subrace for elf, which is basically this choice between high elf and wood elf. So high elves are going to get the firebolt cantrip, and wood elves are going to get fleet of foot, which is that extra movement speed we discussed. So cantrips are basically spells that you can cast usually as an action you can do them unlimited amount of times. They don't consume spell slots. And the other thing to note when dealing with spells is they're based on some type of ability modifier. And so if we look at Firebolt, we can see basically it's an evocation cantrip. So this tells you the school of magic and the type of spell, cantrip. And then this is the approximate damage based on the dice getting rolled and the damage type. And then it'll give you a spell description. It'll show you the range, 18 meters. And then it'll show you the spell casting ability that it's using for that type of damage. Basically, when you roll an attack roll for spells, this is the attribute that will be influencing that roll. And if we hit T, we can look at spell casting ability modifier. And this says a bonus or penalty based on the ability your class uses to cast spells. The ability is indicated on your character sheet with a star. And so we can see for Sorcerer, different than something like a wizard, intellect is not actually our spellcasting ability. It is charisma. You can see it has the star over here. So this shows primary ability, the most important ability for your class. It influences your chance to hit and your damage output with weapon attacks or spells. And if we mouse over charisma, we can basically see these different bonuses we're getting right now and where they're coming from. And it says improved spellcasting for bards, paladins, sorcerers, and warlocks. And so this is one of the main stats we want to focus on. So note that if you pick a high elf for sorcerer, this firebolt cantrip is going to be interacting with intelligence, not charisma. So keep that in mind. So now going through the other races real quick. Tiefling, the main thing we're going to we get dark vision as well, and we're going to get resistance to fire damage. And if we look at the Tiefling sub races, the Asmodeus Tiefling is going to get a produce flame cantrip, little fireball you can conjure for light and then throw. Mephistopheles Tiefling is going to get Mage Hand, which is a very useful sort of utility hand you can cast to interact with stuff from a range. And then Zariel Tiefling is going to get Thaumaturgy, which is going to give you advantage on intimidation and performance checks. So you can basically choose your subrace for each race based on, this little extra bonus you want to do. Do you want to be better in dialogue for intimidation performance? Do you want to be able to mess with stuff at a range with magic, pull levers, open doors, etc.? Or do you want a little extra, light with some extra fire damage? For Drow, our class features are superior dark vision. So these guys are going to be able to see double the distance in the dark, so 24 meters instead of 12. They also have Drow weapon training, so you're going to gain proficiency with rapier, short sword, and hand crossbow. We can see those added over here. So again, that just means adding our +2, or as a proficiency bonus scales, whatever that is, to our attack rolls with those weapons. And then Fey Ancestry, similar to Elves, right, where we're going to get advantage on saving throws against being charmed, and magic can't put us to sleep. And if we look at the drow sub races, you'll see no mechanics are really changing. So this is basically a lore choice, with this Lothsworn being, sort of the evil version, and Seldarine being sort of repenting drow trying to be good. And then, of course, humans. So regular move speed, and then civil militia. So humans are going to gain weapon proficiency with several close ranged weapons such as spears, pikes, halberds, and glaives. And then they're also going to get armor proficiency with light armor and shields. So armor in Dungeons and Dragons, if you're playing a sorcerer, by default, you're actually not going to be able to wear armor because it will limit your spell casting, and you will have disadvantage on your attacks. But you see, if you can gain armor proficiency from something like a trait like this civil militia as a human, if you come over here, this armor got added. See, it's not there before, but with the proficiency, you can now see we have proficiency in light armor and shields as a human. And basically what that's going to do is it's going to let you wear light armor without imposing disadvantage on your attack rolls or preventing you from casting spells. Same with shields. And then for human versatility, you're going to select an additional skill to be proficient in, and your carrying capacity is going to be increased by 1/4. So you'll be able to carry a little bit more, and you will be able to choose another skill with proficiency, which we can see right here under abilities. So basically when you go into this list, you're going to be able to select one more than you normally would. And we will cover that in a minute here. So for Githyanki, one of the main things they have is this astral knowledge ability, and this is going to let them gain proficiency in all skills of a chosen ability. And what this means basically is when they cast this, until they take a long rest, they're going to be able to gain proficiency in any of these skills of their choosing. So let's say when you casted it, you chose dexterity. That's going to give you proficiency. So it's going to add your +2 modifier to anything that shows a dexterity under the name right here. So we can see acrobatics, sleight of hand, and stealth are all affected by the dexterity ability. And so if we cast that and choose dexterity, we're going to get an extra +2 to these three until we take a long rest. So this basically gives Githyanki Sorcerer a bit of versatility with how they're interacting with the world and what proficiency they're focused on at any point in time, or sort of covering their weaknesses if they have certain things they're not that good at. And then for cantrips, you're going to get just a free Mage Hand cantrip. And so for utility, I think Githyanki is a great choice for race, because you're going to get a free Mage Hand. You're going to get this ability to change your proficiencies on the fly. And then the main feature you're going to get is you're going to get armor proficiency with light and medium armor, as well as proficiency with short sword, long sword, and great sword. So Githyanki is just a great mix of extra utility, extra proficiency, and extra weapon and armor proficiency, where you're going to be able to use armor where you normally can't. You're also going to be able to use all these different kinds of swords. So if you're looking for a little bit more of a melee engaging sorcerer, you're going to be able to do the armor with the swords. I think Githyanki is a great choice for that. You can see there's no subrace for the Githyanki, and a decent amount of these actually don't have a subrace. So dwarf, these are one of the ones with shorter movement speed. You got the short stubby legs, even though they're very powerful, you can't run that fast, and so you're going to lose 1.5 meters of movement speed per turn. But you're hopefully going to make up with that with your dwarven combat training. This is going to give you proficiency with battle axe, hand axe, light hammer, and war hammer. We can see those added over here, just like the other ones. You're also going to get 12-meter dark vision, and then you're going to get dwarven resilience, which is going to give you advantage on saving throws against poison, and you have resistance to poison damage. So what that means is if you take poison damage, it's literally going to be cut in half. That's what resistance does in Dungeons & Dragons. And you can see if we hit inspect here, basically what advantage on saving throws means is we're going to get to roll 2 dice when we're making a saving throw against poison. So dwarves are very hardy against poison. They have advantage when they're trying to save against it, and then they're also going to take half damage by default because they are resistant to it. And so for the dwarf subraces, for gold dwarf, you're going to get a 1 hit point max increase, increased by another hit point every time you gain a level. So, you know, more of a beefier, health-oriented build. Shield dwarf is going to give you armor proficiency, where you wouldn't have with these other 2 subraces in light and medium armor. And then Duragar is going to give you superior dark vision, similar to Drow, where you're going to have double the distance you can see in the dark. And then you're also going to have advantage on saving throws against illusions and being charmed or paralyzed. So you'll basically get to roll 2 dice when saving against those effects. Then we have half-elf. So half-elves have the normal movement speed. They have civil militia, just like the humans do, where they're going to gain proficiencies with these 4 different melee weapons, as well as light armor and shields. And then they are also going to get the 12-meter dark vision, and they also have Fey ancestry, similar to Drow and Elf, where they are going to get advantage on saving throws against being charmed, and magic cannot put you to sleep. Halfling got the short legs again, so we're a little less movement speed. One of the really cool things about halflings is this lucky feature, and so basically what this is going to do is when you roll a 1 for any attack roll, ability check, or saving throw, you can re-roll the dice. And it says you must use the new roll, but that's always going to be, you know, it might be a 1 again, but it's usually going to be higher than a 1, so you're going to want to use the new roll anyways. And so that's just going to save you from, you know, basically totally botching it with a natural 1. And then Brave is going to give you advantage on saving throws against being frightened. And if we look at the halfling subraces, if you're looking to be more of a stealthy sorcerer, this will be a good choice, being a lightfoot halfling, because you're going to get advantage on stealth checks. And then being a strong heart halfling, you're going to get advantage on saving throws against poison and resistance to poison damage. So this is going to basically give that same thing dwarves have, the resistance to poison with the advantage. And then Gnome, short legs again. Gnome Cunning is going to give you advantage on intelligence, wisdom, and charisma saving throws. So this is actually a huge, a very useful feature that's going to come into play a lot. And so if you're looking to not get influenced by spells and effects that use these 3 abilities, which are a huge, you know, most of spells and effects in the game fall under one of these 3. Gnomes are a great choice for that. And then if we look at the gnome subraces, Rock Gnome's going to have dark vision with Artificer's Lore, which is going to add twice your proficiency bonus to history checks. Basically what that means is you're going to get, you know, a plus, if your proficiency bonus is +2, you're going to get a +4. So like if we go over to our abilities, we can see our proficiency bonus right here. If we check out here, it says history ×2 now, right? And so we're actually going to get +4 on our history with our other, whatever else is affecting it. And so whatever our intelligence is giving us, +4. So our intelligence right now is giving us +1, we can see here, and it's an intelligence-based ability. And so the 1 plus the 4 is going to give us a total of 5 right now with history. And we're going to get into all this stuff in a second to discuss the details of that. And then we have Forest Gnome, which is going to give you this really cool ability to cast Speak with Animals. So during the story and the dialogue, you'll be able to interact with beasts more than you would otherwise. And then you're also going to get Dark Vision. And then Deep Gnome is going to give you superior Dark Vision, similar to Drow. And you're also going to get advantage on stealth checks. And then Dragonborn, one of the probably, you know, sort of coolest and most popular choices for Sorcerer, just because of their sort of magical heritage as dragons. You can see the only feature they're getting is this move speed, because a huge portion of what they get is based on their subrace. And so we can see we have a ton of different subrace options here. And these are basically the different chromatic colors and the different metallic sheens of dragons. And this is going to influence basically it's called a class action, but you're going to be able to cast this breath, and the element is going to change based on your subrace. And then you're also going to get resistance to that same damage type. And so for Black Dragon, you're going to get Acid Breath with resistance to acid damage. Blue Dragon, you're going to get Lightning Breath with resistance to lightning damage. Brass is Fire with resistance to fire damage. Bronze is Lightning, again, just the metallic sort of correlate to blue, right? Copper is Acid again, so the metallic correlation to the chromatic black, right? Gold is going to give us fire again. Green is going to give us poison. Red is going to give us fire. Silver is going to give us frost and cold, and then white is going to give us frost and cold as well. And then the last race for Sorcerer is going to be Half-Orc. And Half-Orc's features are they have the 12-meter dark vision. They have this relentless endurance, which is a really cool thing, unique to orcs. And if you reach 0 hit points, you hit 1 hit point instead of becoming down. So basically, you know, if you get hit by an attack that takes away all your health and you're about to go down, instead of going down, you'll come back up with 1 hit point. And so that will enable you to, you know, take an additional action on your next turn instead of your character just being downed. And then the other really cool one about Half-Orc is Savage Attacks is when you land a critical hit with a melee weapon attack, your damage dice are tripled instead of doubled. So I think if you're looking to play like a daggers, quarterstaffs, or light crossbow focused Sorcerer, Orc is a really good one because you're going to get, you know, this extra combat endurance combined with bigger criticals with your weapons. In general, those sorcerers aren't usually focused on weapon type combat. We are much more focused on our spells and cantrips. So let's take a look at that next. But let's start with the subclass for Sorcerer. And this is probably one of the most important choices you're going to make as a Sorcerer. And so this is basically going to influence a great deal of how the class plays. Like, this is basically your version of Sorcerer. So we can see there's 3 choices. Wild Magic is the first one, probably the most common or popular. And basically what this is going to do is you're going to be able to trigger this Tides of Chaos, and it's going to give you advantage on your next attack roll, ability check, or saving throw. So basically a very useful way to be able to roll 2 dice instead of 1 in important situations when you're trying to save from something or make an attack that's really important, or an ability check that you really need to succeed on. And then when you do that, it's going to increase the chance of Wild Magic surge afterward. And Wild Magic is a pretty crazy thing where basically what it says is wild magic stems from the forces of chaos. It turns within the sorcerers that wield it, waiting to burst free. And so this is going to unleash all kinds of crazy effects that are sort of unpredictable, that are going to very much change the flow of combat. And so if you watch the previous video with the developers talking about the different classes in Baldur's Gate 3, he references wild magic, and a couple of the examples he gives is like all of a sudden your spells now heal instead of doing damage. So all of a sudden your sorcerer is the most powerful healer on your team while that wild magic surge is happening. Or you have the opportunity to swap places on the battlefield with another character, you know, because you get one of these wild magic surges. So if you're looking for a playstyle that offers a lot of like adaptability and creativity and sort of going with the moment based on chaos and RNG, I think Wild Magic is a perfect choice for you. The second one is Draconic Bloodline. And your veins carry draconic magic, the result of a powerful dragon ancestor. And what this is going to give us is a hit point maximum increase for each sorcerer level. So something here, if you're really looking to max out your hit points, you could actually double up and go with the dwarf race. The gold dwarf is going to get hit points, additional hit points every level, and then you know, you can sort of double up on that with doing something like a draconic bloodline. But there's little synergies like that that you'll want to look for in the race features that we just talked about if you're trying to do something specific with your sorcerer. So back to the draconic bloodline, you're going to get these extra hit points, and then you're also going to get a base armor class of 13. And so this is basically going to give you, you know, the equivalent or something similar of what wearing like light armor would give you just for free. You'll just start with that armor class because you have dragon scale skin. And you also get this really cool sort of visual effect that you can change in the character appearance if you do pick the draconic bloodline. And that's basically going to mirror scales related to your ancestral heritage and the color or metallic sheen of whatever dragon you are tied to. And then the final choice for sorcerer subclass is Storm Sorcery, and this one is it sounds like the one that Larian added specifically for this game. That's not necessarily in the normal Dungeons and Dragons rule set. And what this is going to give you is probably one of the coolest things you could ask for as a sorcerer. And after you cast a level 1 spell, it's called Tempestuous Magic. So after you cast a level 1 spell or higher, you can fly as a bonus action until the end of your turn without receiving opportunity attacks. So basically what this means, an opportunity attack is when you try to move out of range of someone who is in melee combat with you. And so as a sorcerer, you're generally not going to want to be engaged in melee. You're going to want to keeping your distance so you can stay alive while dominating the battlefield with spells. And so what this is going to give you the ability to do is if anyone engages you in melee, after you cast the spell, you are literally going to be able to fly away as a bonus action without taking opportunity attacks. So this is going to give your sorcerer a ton of mobility and the ability to survive a lot better by fleeing from melee attackers and potentially even going up to ledges or places where you can gain range for a spell that you normally wouldn't be able to reach because you can't normally fly. And so I think I'm going to be playing a Storm Sorcerer just because of how totally rad that is. Alright, now let's take a look at our abilities, and the way you want to think of abilities is basically like your core stats. And there's 6 core stats in the game, you can see them all right here, and like we talked about earlier for Sorcerer, Charisma is going to be our most important one, because this is what's going to influence our spell casting and our damage with our spells. I honestly feel like the recommended setup that I have here is really solid actually, so if you wanted to just go next and not really care about these, I think the setup will serve you just fine and will work for a large majority of builds. But if you're looking to play more of a unique style of Sorcerer where you're trying to customize your build a bit, it is worth understanding what these are. The only changes I would make is if I'm planning to have another intelligence-based or wisdom-based character in my party, which I likely am, you can redistribute these stats to be a little more effective. And so what I'm probably going to do is take these 2 points out of wisdom, and that's just going to bring me from a 0 on those saving throws and checks to a -1, similar to my strength. And this is basically because I'm going to be relying on other members in my party for these kinds of checks and such. And so same with strength, and I'm going to reinvest that power to be extra strong at the things I'm good at. And so I'm going to take these 2 points from wisdom and I'm going to add them into constitution. That's going to give me 1 more hit point. You can see over here it just got added. And so if I take it out, I'm at 8. If I put it back in, and you can see I'm at +2 to checks and +4 to throws. When we make the jump to 16, we'll be at +3 to checks, +5 to throws, and we get our extra hit point. And I'm going to rely on someone else in my party to be wise and intuitive, but that's not me as a Dragonborn Sorcerer, apparently, right? The other thing I'm going to do is I'm probably going to actually have a wizard in my party for sure, because I'm going to run Sorcerer Wizard, double spellcaster, and so I'm going to actually take 2 points out of intelligence. I don't want to be super dumb, so I'm just going to have it be a 0, but I'm basically going to reinvest those points into dexterity. And you can see if I do that, that's going to take me from a +1 on checks and a +1 on throws to a +2 on checks and a +2 on throws. And I plan on doing some cool stuff with Mage Hand and sneaking around and flying on this guy, so I know I'm going to be getting into some dexterity checks. And so I just want that +1 extra to my rolls and my dexterity related saving throws. It's also going to affect my initiative and armor class, where you can see that jump also took our initiative up by 1 as well. And so dexterity is quite a valuable attribute sometimes to have. So this setup is basically going to give us the max possible charisma we can get starting, and this is going to be the attribute that's scaling our attack rolls and damage, right? And then we're going to be not wise and not strong at all. We're used to being weak as a sorcerer, right? But our strength comes from our mind and the raw magic in our blood. Now, I will say, if you were wanting to play like a dwarf melee sorcerer, like a Githyanki sword sorcerer, it might be worth investing more heavily into strength or dex based on the weapon type you're planning on using, right? So a dwarf, if you're using warhammers and stuff like that, it's likely going to be strength. And if you're using like rapiers and bows and such, it's going to be finesse. But yeah, this is the setup I'm going to go with. Plenty of health, max damage, pretty dexterous, and not super dumb, and unwise and weak, but strong-blooded, right? And then for our skill proficiencies, this is very much related to our background, but we can take a look in here and you can see this is basically the bonus we currently have to different rolls, types of checks that we've made in the game. And these are basically based off of our attributes that we just distributed here. And so you can see for the charisma checks like deception or persuasion or intimidation, we have a pretty high base. We have a base of 3, and then our proficiency bonus, if we select it here as a proficient one, will give us a +5 total, +3, +2, right? And then we could move one of them, you know, we could take a 3 and move it to something like insight if we didn't want to be super bad at insight. But again, I think it's usually more worth it to rely on other characters to cover your weaknesses in a party-based game like this, and take something that you're already good at to really lean into being powerful at that one thing, or those few couple focused things, right? And you can see also we are getting a +2 bonus to Arcana and History because of our background. And so if we jump over here and look at background, again, similar to race or a lot of the other decisions you make during character creation, this is basically going to be a lore choice or a mechanics choice. And so you can sort of decide based on this description and where your character comes from and their worldview, what background suits them best, or you could take a look at how these different skills are becoming proficient and basically decide the type of background you want based on that, right? So let's say I'm trying to be more of a sneaky sorcerer. Urchin might be a good one for that because it's going to give me sleight of hand, which is doing stuff like disarming traps and picking locks and pockets, and it's going to increase my ability to hide and stay out of sight in the shadows. So this +4 it's showing me right now, 2 of it's coming from dexterity, right? And then 2 of it's coming from these being my bonuses now as an urchin that are getting added to my skill proficiencies here. So I get to select 2, and then I get to have 2 on my background. And a lot of times you want to try to sync these up at least a little bit with an attribute you're already built into, for the same reason we talked about here, where because I have a little bit of investment into dex, I'm going to get a +4 instead of a +3 on these. In the same way I'm getting a +5 on the charisma, right? All right, so the final big decision we are going to have to make as a sorcerer or sorceress is what magic do we want to wield? What sort of powers do we want to bring to the battlefield? And what sort of a focus do we want to have? Because we're going to have to pick a few cantrips and level 1 spells to start out with. And so let's start with cantrips. So these are basically the lowest level types of spells in Dungeons & Dragons. And the upside is they're going to get unlimited uses, whereas your normal spells, you're going to have a limited number of uses between each rest. And so you'll have to take a long rest to refresh these slots, whereas your cantrips you'll be able to do over and over again, regardless of whether you rest or not. And so while they are the lowest level spells, they often end up being some of the most highly valued because of how often you can use them and how useful they can be for different situations. So there's a lot going on here. I'm going to basically describe the basics of what's going on in these tooltips, and then I'll try to do a super quick description of each one. But if we went through every spell and every cantrip in detail, it's going to make this video like another hour long. And so let's just take a look at sort of how they work. So let's start out with Blade Ward. Take only half the damage from bludgeoning, piercing, and slashing attacks. So this is basically going to give you resistance to physical damage for 2 turns. We can see it shows that it's an action here, so this is what it's going to take to use it. So most turns you're going to have an action, a bonus action, and movement, and so this will take your action for that turn, and it's going to give you this resistance for 2 turns. And now we move on to the next one, which is Acid Splash. There's a little more going on in this tooltip. We can see it's basically going to designate the type of damage here. So this is a Conjuration School cantrip, and it's doing acid damage. This is the average damage we will do, and it's showing what dice gets rolled with the type of elemental damage here. And then it will give a description, throw a bubble of acid that damages each target it hits. And then it'll show your range here. So this is going to be a non-area of effect spell because it's not designated here, and it's going to go to 18 meters, so it's going to hit 1 target up to 18 meters away, and the target will have to make a saving throw. So sort of the 2 different types of attacks we have here. One is going to be a target making a saving throw against your spell save DC, and basically what this means is this is going to scale up as you increase in levels. But this is basically any spell where you see it has this save in the tooltip. So Acid Splash, Poison Spray, Light, you see it has this save designated here. And basically what this means is instead of making a spell attack roll where we roll the dice, our enemies are going to have to roll the dice to try to resist it. And they're going to have to beat whatever our spell DC is. So right now our spell DC is 13. So for this spell, in order for it to go into effect, the enemy has to roll a save and beat a 13, and they'll be adding their dex modifier. That's what this dex means versus Poison Spray, where the enemy would be adding their con modifier. So basically, you know, like Acid Splash will work better against targets with low dex. Poison Spray will work better against targets with low con, etc. And then the other type of attacks is going to be a spell attack roll. And similarly, this is going to continue to scale up as we level and increase our charisma. But right now, because of our 16 in charisma, we're getting a +5 to our melee and ranged spell attacks. So for things like Ray of Frost or Firebolt, we are going to roll a dice ourselves, and we're going to add +5 to that roll because it's a spell attack. And that is going to determine whether we hit the target or not. And so these types of spells can completely miss, and these types of spells can be resisted. I hope that makes sense. So let's keep going. Mage Hand, this is going to be a super valuable utility spell. It's going to let you interact with objects, levers, doors, traps from a range, 18 meters, and it's going to last for 10 turns. we can see if we mouse over it here, we can see the little Conjured Spectre stats where it's going to have 3 health, 5 AC, and a movement of 9 meters, or a range of 9 meters to navigate around. And then Poison Spray, one we looked at for the con save, but it's basically going to be 1d12 poison damage, and it's going to be much shorter range. You can see only 3 meters, still in action. True Strike is going to give you advantage on your next attack roll. What that means is you're going to basically get this buff, and you're going to be able to roll 2 dice instead of 1 on any attack rolls you're making against the creature. This is a concentration spell, so something else very important to keep in mind is you can only have 1 concentration spell active at a time. And so if you're using something like True Strike, you won't be able to cast Friends during True Strike because it's also concentration. So if you try to cast Friends while you have True Strike up, True Strike will drop off, and this holds true for Dancing Lights or any other concentration spell that shows this concentration tooltip. The other thing to note about concentration is if you take damage above a certain threshold, you will have to roll to try to maintain your concentration. And so a lot of these concentration spells, you're going to want to be in a position where you're not taking damage so you can keep them active. Because if you are taking damage, you may have to make a roll to keep that effect up. So the next one is Friends. This is going to be more of an out of combat spell, and that's going to give you advantage on charisma checks. And then you can see right here, some of these have a little warning. And so this says in higher difficulty modes, the target might accuse you of enchanting them, meaning your target might be aware that you cast Friends after the Friends wears off, right? So they might get pissed after they're friendly type of thing, right? Dancing Lights, this is just going to illuminate a radius for 10 turns, cast up to 18 meters, also concentration. This will be useful if your party doesn't have much dark vision, or if you're needing to navigate without light in a lot of dark places. Firebolt is just like Ray of Frost, going to be just a standard spell attack roll with 1d10 fire damage up to 18 meters. You can see Ray of Frost is very similar. It's just going to be 1d8 instead of 1d10. The additional effect on Ray of Frost is it's going to reduce their movement speed by 3 meters if you hit. And so I prefer Ray of Frost over Firebolt, but that's really going to depend on playstyle and what type of sorcerer you're trying to rock. And then Light is going to do a similar thing to Dancing Lights. It's going to illuminate a radius for 7.5 meters of light, but it can only affect one thing at a time, and it's got to be cast on an object. Shocking Grasp is actually going to be a melee spell. So we can see right here the range is 2 meters of melee attack. And so we're going to have to get right up on stuff to use this. And the cool thing about this spell is it's going to have advantage on creatures with metal armor, and it's going to make the target not be able to use reactions for a turn. So for example, if you went up and Shocking Grasped a Sorcerer, this shield we looked at, that's a reaction, they wouldn't be able to cast shield that next turn because they can't take reactions, right? And so there's a lot of different skills and abilities for different classes that are reactions that you'll be able to disable for a turn with this spell. Minor Illusion, this is going to be more of an out of combat one that you're going to, basically is going to compel creatures to go and investigate. So if you're trying to do a lot of sneaking, or if you're trying to, navigate the world using some creative and unique interactions by misleading enemies, this is a great spell for that type of stuff. Also can be cast while silenced. And then the final one is going to be Bone Chill, and this is a Necromancy cantrip, and this is going to do 1d8 necrotic damage. It's going to prevent the target from healing until your next turn. So if you're able to cast this successfully on something, again, going to be a spell attack roll, adding your charisma, your +5 right now. It's going to make it so they can't heal for a turn. So if their healer tries to heal them that turn, or if they try to drink a potion or something like that, it's not going to have any effect. And if the target happens to be undead, they'll also have disadvantage on attack rolls. So kind of a cool necro utility spell here. So those are our cantrips. Now let's take a look at our spells. So real quick, going through the spell list, Burning Hand's just going to be a 5-meter radius dex save fire spell, dealing 3d6 fire damage. On a save, the target will still take half damage. So these ones where you see on save, target still takes half damage. These are really useful because they're going to hit every time and do some amount of damage. So even if the target, is able to do this dex save and beat a 13, they're still going to take half of whatever fire damage you roll. There's a couple other ones that are like that as well. But Burning Hands is just a really cool radius damage pump spell. Charm Person is going to be similar to Friends, where you're going to charm a humanoid to prevent it from attacking you, and you're going to get advantage on charisma checks and dialogue. Similar thing where they might accuse you of doing this to them. Also, damage is going to end this effect early if you accidentally or purposely hit that target. Next one is Chromatic Orb. This is a super cool evocation spell, probably one of my favorite spells because of how versatile it is, because you can actually change the damage type on the fly with each cast, and then that damage type has a chance to create a surface. And so a lot of times those surfaces can be interacted with, where if it's ice, it's going to create, like if we come over here and look at Ice Knife, we can see this is going to create an ice surface in a 2 meter wherever we hit it. And so what ice surface does is it's going to be difficult terrain, so movement speed is going to be halved and creatures may fall prone. And so you can get a lot of cool different effects with these surfaces, where if you cast a Chromatic Orb and you change the damage type to ice, it will have a chance to spawn an ice surface. And there's all kinds of different things you can do with these surfaces. And in previous games like Divinity Original Sin 2, you could even do stuff like if it's a poison surface, light it on fire. If it's a water surface, electrocute it. Really cool magic interactions like that. Color Spray is going to blind creatures up to a combined 33 hit points. So it's a 5 meter radius. What this hit points thing means, so this is the condition of blind, right? But what this 33 hit points means is it's going to affect a total of that amount of hit points for that many creatures. So it's not doing 33 hit points of damage or anything like that. It's literally just blinding up to 33 hit points of enemies. So if there's a 12 HP enemy and a 15 HP enemy and a 30 HP enemy all within 5 meters, and you cast this, it's going to effectively blind the 10 HP enemy and the 12 HP enemy, but will not blind the 30 HP enemy or whatever, right? It'll do a combined up to 33, and anything over 33 will sort of resist the effect. I hope that makes sense. Disguise Self, pretty self-explanatory. Just magically change all aspects of your appearance to be someone else for a bit. Pretty rad spell. Expeditious Retreat. This one's really cool because you can see at the bottom it's not an action. It's actually able to be cast as a bonus action. So if you take an action on your turn, like another attack or something like that, you will be able to cast this as a bonus action in addition to that on the same turn. Also a concentration spell, so you won't be able to use it with the other concentration spells. We talked about it, but what it's basically going to do is give you this ability to dash as a bonus action. So you'll be able to do additional movement as a bonus action. It's going to last until your next long rest. So a lot of value if you can maintain your concentration by not getting hit. A lot of times this extra movement will help you not get hit. So this is like a pretty rad spell if you're looking to be a more mobile sorcerer. False Life, you're going to gain temporary hit points. So the way temporary hit points work in D&D is essentially it's additional hit points like a barrier or a shield or something like that. It's not going to be like actual hit points where you can't revive like a downed creature from them. And you can only have one set of temporary hit points at a time. So you can't like stack barriers. It's just going to be like if you have this and you try to cast something else with temporary hit points, it's going to override it if it's more, right? So you can only have one set of these up at a time. And this is going to give us 7. And you can see it can only be gained from one source. Featherfall, self-explanatory again, just going to give you a slower fall and immunity to falling damage, but also can be cast as a bonus action instead of an action, going to last for 10 turns. Fog Cloud, concentration spell. So to keep this Fog Cloud off, you will have to maintain concentration. It's going to last for 10 turns, 5 meter radius. You'll be able to cast it up to 18 meters away, and it's going to blind, which is going to do that effect that we looked at in one of the cantrip spells where it gives stuff disadvantage on attack rolls. Ranged attacks are reduced to 3 meters, and you will have advantage on attacks against creatures that are blinded. And it's going to do this condition where it heavily obscures that area. And that's going to basically give you or other creatures the ability to try to hide in that cloud. So if you're playing sort of a stealth-based team, or if you have a rogue in the party that's trying to hide a lot to get assassinations, this is a very useful spell to enable stealth. Ice Knife, wicked cool spell that we looked at a second earlier. Something to note with this is it's going to be a dex save instead of a spell attack roll, but it's going to be up to 18 meters, and it's going to be a very damage type, which is pretty rad. Most of our damage ends up being some type of elemental damage. This one's actually going to give us some piercing damage when we throw the knife, and then it's going to explode in additional cold damage, and it's going to create an ice surface 100% of the time. And then this spell can also be cast while we're silenced. And you can see the silence condition: can't speak or cast spells with a verbal component, and is immune to thunder damage. Which thunder is like acoustic damage, basically, you want to think of it as. And so if you're silenced, you can't hear. And so you'll be immune to thunder damage. So the ice surface also really clutch we talked about, but it's going to just for 2 turns create this 2-meter surface where movement speed is halved and creatures may fall prone. So I really like this ice knife spell. Enhanced leap is going to triple a creature's jumping distance for 10 minutes. Got to be within melee range to cast it. Mage armor. If you don't have any armor proficiency because of your race, and you're looking to add some extra defensives to your class, if you're going to be maybe up in melee a little more than normal, you can run this, and this is going to basically make your base armor 13 plus your dex modifier. So us right now, +2. This would give us a 15 armor class without wearing any armor, and it's going to last until our long rest, and it's not concentration. So, you know, you'll basically be able to cast this after you rest, and you'll have this sort of magical armor on the whole time. And you can't be wearing armor, obviously, if you do it, but you'll have this magical armor on the whole time until you rest. And then there are other classes, like a monk, for example, where you could also cast this on them to give them AC if they're not wearing any armor. You know, other classes that do have sort of synergies with the no armor thing. Magic Missile, super cool spell, kind of one of the staples of the D&D Magic verse, where you're going to get 3 magical darts that shoot out, each dealing 2 to 5 force damage. So you can see that roll is actually 3d4 plus 3, and they're always going to hit their target. And so this is not a spell attack roll, it's just going to hit 100% of the time. The only way you're going to miss is if the target has shield up. And shield is that special spell we looked at earlier that's a reaction, where if you're about to get hit by an enemy, you can cast it to increase your armor class. And the other effect is you take no damage from Magic Missile. And so if you're running shield and an enemy caster is trying to Magic Missile you, you can actually, as a reaction, cast shield on yourself when those Magic Missiles are coming in and resist it. And so this is, in general, though, a very useful spell because someone will need to be a caster running shield in order for it not to hit. And it does good damage, very solid at just, you know, guaranteed finishing targets off without that chance to miss. Ray of Sickness is going to be a con save and has a chance to poison the target. So poison is pretty brutal in D&D, where you're going to suffer disadvantage on attack rolls and ability checks while you're poisoned. And so that's a big deal because most of the things you're trying to do are one of those 2 things during combat. So this would be 18 meters con save, 2d8 poison. And then shield, we talked about quite a bit already. The +5 AC and no damage from magic missiles, able to be cast as a reaction, lasts until long rest. Sleep is going to put up to 24 hit points of enemies to sleep. So same as our blind example. You know, if you have a 10 HP hit point and a 12 HP hit point and a 30 HP hit point, those first 2 are going to fall asleep because they are less than 24 total, but that 30 HP hit point will, you know, not be affected. And this is going to be, this has no radius. This will be a single target spell. So this will actually be if the target itself has less or more than 24 hit points. So if you try to cast this on that 30 HP target, not going to work. If you try to cast it on the 12 HP target, will work, right? And so we can see here the conditions of sleeping. A lot of stuff kind of going on, but they basically can't move or act, and they'll automatically fail strength and dex saving throws. Attack rolls have advantage against them, and any attack that hits the creature is a critical hit if the attacker is within melee range, and it's removed once they take damage or if they're helped by a teammate. And so this is a cool spell for like setting up melee members of your party to get this guaranteed critical when the target is sleeping. Thunder Wave, another sort of staple of D&D magic. This is going to release a wave of thunderous force that pushes away all creatures and objects. And on a save similar to Burning Hands, the target will still take half damage. It's going to be a con save and also 5 meter area effect. And the really cool thing about this one is the push, right? Where you can sort of create space. And if something is engaged with you, where if you moved away, it would get an attack of opportunity. This will let you push it away if it fails the con save, and then you can move afterward without taking that attack of opportunity, right? And then Wish Bolt, probably one of the most powerful spells we can pick because of the sustained damage on it. And so basically what makes this one special is once we successfully cast it, so we're going to have to make a spell attack roll with our charisma, with our +5 right now. But if we hit and we maintain concentration, we don't get hit and lose it or cast another concentration spell, we're actually being able to hold our Witch Bolt up on our target for an additional 10 turns. So every turn that goes by, we're going to be able to trigger it as an action still to do an additional 1d12 lightning damage. And so this is a very good, consistent DPS spell, especially for larger HP targets, and especially if you're out of your you know, like other higher level spell slots. You know, this is a level 1 spell that over the course of its turn, let's say you got super lucky and rolled 10 12s in a row, you could do 120 damage, lightning damage, with this you know, level 1 evocation spell over 10 turns, right? And so just pretty rad, pretty useful damage spell. So I hope you enjoyed that. My name is Zikaric. I will be playing this sorcerer, this storm sorcerer, quite a bit, and I'll be live streaming some of it. You can check out my stream at Zikaric with a 0 on Twitch. I will also be making hopefully deeper build guides on different kinds of sorcerer, starting with storm sorcerer. I really love games like this, but I also play games like Diablo 4, more action RPGs. So if you play that, I play a sorcerer in that. Have a bunch of different build guides planned for that as well. So I'll also be streaming a lot of Diablo 4. So if you want to say what's up, have any questions, or just hang out, consider stopping by the stream. Otherwise, enjoy your adventures in the world of Dungeons & Dragons and the city of Baldur's Gate. Take care of yourself, and I'll catch you in the next one. Peace.
You need a guardian. Choose one.